Hey everyone, FusedVR coming at ya, and today super excited to share with you guys our first ever episode of Creator Chats. Now, what Creator Chats are segments during our live stream that happen every other week where we'll bring on someone creating cool VR content, and basically they can talk about whatever they're working on, and it's a chance for you guys to ask questions as well. So if this is something you want to participate in, then definitely fill out the form in the description below, and we'll get in touch to set up a time to actually do it. And if there's someone you want to see on these streams, then definitely leave a comment below, and we'll try to get in touch with them to see if we can make that happen. And last but not least, if you have suggestions or feedback of what you want to see happen in these streams, then also leave that as a comment, and we'll see if we can make that happen. I know there were a few visual glitches that happened, but I still think the content in this is super valuable, so that's why we decided to share it. So with that out of the way, let's welcome in Vincent and Hassan, who are going to talk about AR and VR. We're happy to have Vincent Chen on the stream. He wrote this blog post on how to get into VR. It's on YC. Definitely go check it out. He's also a member of Rabbit Hole. So you can see here, Rabbit Hole is Stanford's VR group. He's the project lead there, kind of organizing all of that. He has his own group. He's going to be talking about some of the stuff he's done there, stuff he's done at YC, stuff he's done at Microsoft, but basically all over the place. And so super cool. If you have questions, definitely throw them in the chat. We'll have like probably 5 or so minutes at the end to do this. And yeah,
cool.
Take it away.
And yeah, thanks again for joining us. A lot of the motivation behind what we're doing with these interviews is it's really cool to see different people making different content and getting different perspectives. So we're excited to see what you guys have to chime in on, and also anything that you want to share about what you've created. So starting question, how'd you get into content creation with AR and VR?
Cool, good question. As FusedVR mentioned before, I spent some time at Microsoft last summer as an intern on their Xbox team, and that was really cool because tomorrow they're announcing some of the specs for their Project Scorpio console that's coming out this winter, and I think Microsoft is in a really special place in terms of VR and AR and mixed reality, as they like to call it. And it was very cool to get that perspective from people who are leading the field there. And after working with people, talking with people there, and seeing what their vision was for where the space was going, I just really wanted to get my feet wet and see how I could get into the field as soon as possible. And the easiest way to do that, like I mentioned in my blog post, was to just start building and start with content creation.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I remember doing like the Fruit Ninja tutorial from FusedVR, and that was a lot of fun. And I definitely, it's cool how tight the community is and how many resources there are to do that.
Nice, yeah, and thanks for the how to get into VR post is just a really good one if you're trying to find different references and some inspiration too. So deviating a little bit from some of the planned questions, just more of a personal question. PSVR or what Microsoft is working on with the Xbox? What one are you more excited about?
I've got to say the Xbox, the Xbox solution. I think they're announcing an E3 tomorrow, and there's a lot of hype. I think they've been pushing forward a really powerful console for a really long time, and I mean, of course, I'm biased. I've been talking to people who have worked on this for many years, and I think, I mean, I don't even know what they're gonna announce, but I think it'll be really special. So.
Cool. Us too.
I'm excited.
And FusedVR's gonna be there to hopefully see some of it.
That's awesome.
Experience everything.
Have fun. E3 is so much fun.
Yeah, I feel like I'm missing out between the three of us. I'm the one that's not gonna see it, but I'll live vicariously through all the tweets and also through you talking about it. So let's talk about projects. So I mean, we've talked about a few different things that you've worked on, but what's one a project that you've worked on recently that you want to talk about, and tell us about any particular challenges or learnings that came from working on that project?
Yeah, I mean, I just to expand on what the kind of work that I do with Rabbit Hole, I lead a group called Rabbit Hole Labs, and what we do there is rapidly prototype a number of interfaces or techniques that we think would be interesting or useful in the space of geometric computing or VR and AR in general. And so what we do is we pick a topic or a theme to do a deep dive into, and then try to come up with a number of solutions that might be helpful for that topic. So one of the ones we went into recently was text input. You know, in a lot of VR systems now, it's kind of insanely hard to input text, whether it's, you know, on the gear doing the gaze and, you know, gaze and click method, which is, I think, the worst.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, that takes forever.
Yeah.
You might as well not enter any text.
Exactly. And you know, I don't think language is good enough to the extent where you can put in exactly what you want with the nuances that you do want. So some of the methods that we tried was, you know, one, a gesture-based input system where you might remember, you know, on your phone there's a bunch of apps that do kind of swipe input, and our hypothesis was that if we take advantage of the, you know, space around us with this gesture-based input, what would that look like? What would that feel like in VR?
Cool. So I want to ask more about
Yeah.
that. So by gesture-based input, what comes to mind is I think about how on some phones you can tap and kind of like drag around
Exactly.
between the
Yeah.
keys. Is that what you're
That's
talking
exactly
about?
what I'm talking about.
That's really interesting. I had never thought about that, but I guess it's a good fit for VR because you kind of have a similar situation on the phone where it's kind of hard to get fidelity on the phone. 'Cause
Right.
sometimes people have huge thumbs or
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
screen's too small. And then VR, like pointing exactly on the key can be really
Mhm.
annoying. But the gesture approach and tying that in with some like prediction of
Exactly.
what they might be trying to say, like
Mhm.
that's pretty cool. So I mean, how did that one pan out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was a lot of fun to build. You know, we kind of took our motto is like build as little as possible. So we took some open source code, which is really wonderful, and started messing around with some keyboards. And one of the challenges that I actually found was that you know, the ratio between what feels good to gesture over and what feels reasonable to, you know, reach with your hand versus what is actually accurate. You know, what you can reasonably, you know, like click with your controller is a very fine one. You know, and you have to really get that right to, you know, not make people be swinging their arms too far, but still give them a level of precision that is, you know, so that they can type what they want. So ultimately, it's kind of a matter of, you know, we have these ideas of what we want to build, but until we really get into it, we have, you know, really no idea how it's going to turn out.
FusedMan got a question from the chat. Someone was asking along the lines of gesture recognition, how much does Vincent mean like a Minority Report type of system where you're kind of dragging screens around?
Yeah, so the interface that we were prototyping was a little bit less about dragging screens around and kind of a window management system, and more just, you know, given a 3D keyboard in front of you, how can you drag your hands across that keyboard? Not unlike how you do on, you know, your iPhone with those swipe keyboards.
Yeah, is that what it's called, the swipe keyboard? Because
I have one called Swift Key right now. There's so many.
Yeah, I think that if you guys Google it, you'll definitely
Yeah.
find it, and it's an interesting solution that I had never thought about applied to VR. So I would love to see it. I mean, it sounds like maybe even we could get you to do a guest video.
Yeah,
or
maybe.
guest
We're
stream.
it's you know, it's finals week, and we're
Nice.
we're gonna try to pull it together. But yeah, I'll shoot you guys the link when
Cool.
it's up in open source.
Yeah, I could even share it with everybody. Get people
that'd be cool.
to add to it and check
That'd be
it
very
out.
cool.
Cool. So we've talked about some of your experience with Microsoft, Xbox. We talked about Rabbit Hole, which is the Stanford VR and AR community. Let's talk about YC, which is another cool thing that you've like been a part of and worked with through blogging and also some campus representation.
Yeah.
So how has your work with YC like influenced your thoughts on the AR and VR space?
Yeah, I mean, you know, a few months ago, Michael Siebel, who runs the YC Core program, put out a blog post about, you know, how excited he was about VR. So there's definitely, you know, a lot of energy there. And I don't know if y'all have read that, but I would definitely recommend it. I think it's just one of those things that's super energizing when you read someone who's investing in the space and has tried it and has felt, you know, the gut reaction of something that is as special as VR and AR. And I think they really do believe that there's so many smart people working on it. Something cool is going to come out of it.
Yeah.
And you know, just working on the blog post, one really interesting thing that I didn't necessarily realize at first was that, you know, I interviewed a few companies in YC's portfolio that are working on VR and AR, and a lot of them are just, you know, straight up engineering companies. They're tech companies. They're not necessarily full-on game studios where every day people are working in Unity, to build games or interactions or things like that. But there's everything from back-end engineers to full-stack engineers to QA engineers. So these companies are very much tech companies, and the space isn't limited to content creation. It's there are a lot of problems and holes that need to be filled in, developer tools and distribution and just platforms in general. And I think anyone who is interested in, I think just getting into the space, I think there's a lot of room for wherever people's skill sets already lie, to kind of, slowly fuse into whatever needs are in the VR space right now.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. I mean, I remember when I was first getting into AR and VR, I was so confused because I thought that it was like this big, scary space.
Yeah.
Like headsets that just looked pretty daunting. Wasn't sure how you actually jump into the space and start developing. And I found that a lot of it is actually just like very standard engineering practices and tasks that have been around for a long time.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like if you're already an engineer, if you know about computer science, if you're into graphics, like it's actually a pretty easy transition. I think that it's a lot of the design stuff that tends to be more difficult. And like you were also saying, there's space for DevOps or tools. I think even for artists, graphic designers, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on too. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we're about to go to questions from the chat if there are any, but before we do that, big question. If you could build anything, if you could build anything with AR or VR, what would you want to build? Is it a keyboard? The best keyboard?
Maybe not. That's honestly that'd be cool. If someone figures it out, that'd be very cool. I think one of the spaces or areas that I care a lot about is health, and I think for point of care, doctors and clinicians and surgeons, a lot of their work revolves around both information and hands-on work or physical work. And what better way to bring those two together than an AR device or an AR experience. And I think there's a lot of work we have to do before we get there, but it just makes a lot of sense to be able to overlay information, whether it be instructions about how to perform a procedure or information about a patient that could be taken advantage of in that space. And it's just one that's really exciting to me.
So you mean health more on the side of like I think we've seen applications of like practicing surgeries, practicing diagnosing patients, or do you mean more like fitness and things that patients do themselves?
I'd say more on the clinician side.
I see. Okay, cool. Definitely an exciting space. I mean, there's a lot of, I think it's exciting particularly because that's where like there's already a lot of proven success in the medical space, people creating stuff that's good for therapy on the patient side, or helping people to get training with things that you just can't easily do, like a surgery or things like that. All right, so thanks for all of that.
Thank you.
How's the chat going?
We talked a little bit about Leap Motion. I don't know if you've experimented with that at all.
I have.
But yeah, we're talking about how maybe these interfaces, I guess, using that to drag panels or use that for input at all.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Like Leap Motion can already track your
fingers,
can
track your fingers. My one issue with it though is you start dragging, and as soon as it gets out of your field of view, like you've lost it, and it's gonna the panel gets stuck there as opposed to like a seamless movement.
The thing that's funny there is that you already have. You should be able to recreate what's going on with the swipe key thing, right? Like you should be able to get somebody to look at their hands and then even just pop up like a model of a phone, a virtual phone, and then they can do their swipe key thing. So surprised that hasn't been done, or maybe it's something to look into with Rabbit Hole Labs, or the video that you might do for us.
Maybe. I think the Leap is a lot of fun. It's very cool to see your hands. I will say that it's I think people in vision and people working on tracking in general have a lot of trouble just like with occlusion. When you have your hands over each other, it just gets into a jumbled mess. And I think for something like the swipe text input, it could be feasible. But if you started getting to like more complex two-handed things, it could get a little messy.
Another question here was about do you think? I mean, we talked about AR a bit, but do you think like the medical industry is going to be more impacted by VR or AR or both?
I mean, my take on AR is that it'll kind of impact every industry more. But I will say that VR has very very measured and tangible results in terms of training and education nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think when that gets implemented in for doctors, for surgeons, I think that'll be really really special.
Yeah. And I guess this is almost a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I mean, you've worked at Microsoft before. What's your take on MR versus AR? Because it kind of came up in that conversation. I was like, or in this question specifically, we're talking about like overlays, which is like, that's kind of where people are drawing the line.
Yeah. This one just confuses me, and it's a constant source of debate between FusedMan and I. So good luck with this.
No, I mean, I try not to get too caught up in the terminology either. I mean, I think to probably butcher what Microsoft's definition of it is, I think MR is where they think the field is going. Where your completely opaque view meets some sense of an overlay, and that combination of being able to switch back and forth and have a sense of presence with a fully virtual space around you is where they think it's going to go eventually. So the answer is I don't know.
I don't know if anybody.
I just call it all AR.
Yeah,
that's what I do. I think
last
other question. Yeah, let's do the last. This from Chris. Says the interesting thing will be once we have AR, anyone can pretty much do anything. Will wages drop? Or we just meet robots at that point? In the case of like superheroes are unique because very few people have that power. But if everyone gets superhero abilities, aka AR, what does that mean? And does that mean that like menial tasks become meaningless? And what was the other part of the question? Oh yeah. Or we just meet robots at that point. I think that one ties more to AI than robots. Yeah, just like.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that. So it makes me think about, and would love to get your comments on this, Vincent. But it makes me think about how Google changed a lot of how knowledge sharing and just knowledge works. Like it's no longer that important to memorize facts. Now we kind of live in a world where being able to synthesize information, recall information, and then like do creative stuff with it is really important. I guess AR takes that to another level. Like if you imagine a world where you constantly just have anything at your fingertips, then what happens?
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's commenting on. Yeah. And what do you think happens in that? That's another big question. So again, good luck. Not sure.
I mean, I think I totally agree with you. I agree that with better tools, with better technology, it just means that you have more time and space to focus on other things. And a lot of people describe AI as a in the short term as just like automation on steroids, right? It's like it's really not that close to super intelligent or like whatever that means. And in the short term, it just means that we're going to be able to automate more things. It'll mean that we'll have to reinvest our time and brain space in other areas, which I think is for the most part a good thing. I mean, it does bring more challenges for what happens to people's jobs, what happens to areas where AI can kind of fill that gap. And I think those are challenges that people working on that are thinking about and need to think more about too.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that it's a net positive. I think locally and per industry, it could definitely upheave some things, but I do think that as humans, like we are endlessly creative. Like we always come up with more stuff to do or more weird things to spend our time on, and I think that like I don't see AI, AR, automation, or anything taking that away from us anytime soon. I think there's always going to be stuff to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks again, Vincent, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So yeah, that pretty much does it for the live stream today. Super exciting stuff. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe or like the video. That helps us out a ton. You can also follow us on social media if you want to get any of the previews about anything we're doing. That does it for today. So this has been FusedMan.
I'm Hassan here.
Hi, I'm Vincent.
We're signing out.